Owen has over a dozen books, including The Headless Boy, Teeth, and the Wilted Lilies series. Her fiction has appeared in Bram Stoker Award-nominated anthologies alongside Neil Gaiman and Stephen King. She is a member of both the HWA and the ITW and has spoken at CIA headquarters. Kelli, over to you.
Thank you. At this point in the story, Maggie is talking to herself a lot, and Jake believes it is the spirit of their unborn baby, Bobby. The story is written from alternating perspectives. Here we start with Jake and move to Maggie. Jake crossed the kitchen and opened the upper cupboard to grab a glass, only to find it filled with bowls and plates instead. He closed the cupboard and rolled his eyes at the pink Post-it note, dishes. He turned and looked around the room for the yellow one declaring glasses and made his way to it. It was the third time Maggie had moved the kitchen continents from cupboard to cabinet and back again. And Jake wondered how many times was normal and how many times was cause for concern. Jake's stomach rumbled, reminding him why he'd come to the kitchen. Glass still in hand, he opened the fridge and scanned the contents like a teen looking to appease a late-night craving. He settled on the leftover spaghetti. There was easily enough to share. He set the Tupperware and glass on the counter and turned to find Maggie to ask if she wanted some. A scraping sound from the sunroom drew his attention, and he popped his head around the corner, expecting to find his wife in the wicker chair. The room was empty and cold. He pulled his sweatshirt sleeves back down from their shoved up to the elbow position and hugged himself. He shivered and checked the windows, noting the source of the chilly air was open more than a crack. Crossing the chilled room to correct the problem, he remembered he'd heard a noise in here and eyed the wicker chair. Old, sturdy, but lightweight. A gust of wind through the window probably moved it enough to make the scraping sound, he reasoned. He shrugged and headed back through the kitchen toward the living room, finding no Maggie at the other end of the house either. Halfway up the stairs, the sound of running water drifted toward him, and he marveled at the fact he'd lost her briefly in the house. Big enough to lose each other. Good. Give her the space she needs to heal, and enough space to fill with children when she's ready to try again. Jake smiled at the idea of small footsteps filling the hallways. He crept up the stairs and entered the master bedroom in stealth mode, not wanting to startle her if the bathroom door was open. It wasn't. He walked to the door and listened, hoping to hear music. It was silent, but for the whoosh of water. He sighed. He missed her shower routine, music blaring, her singing, but he knew a truly happy Maggie would return to it eventually. Until then, he was content to hear nothing other than the water. At least she wasn't sobbing uncontrollably on the shower floor again. When he'd found her like that, he had helped her out, dried her off, put her in her winter day pajamas, and held her for hours while she cried, napped, and woke to cry again. December had been a rough month. January wasn't much better, but now in April, they seemed to be closer to simply remembering the pain rather than being immersed in it. Maggie had graduated from good moments to good days. The week before they moved, she'd had several days in a row where she seemed almost back to normal. Grief was a horrible thing, and Jake knew that. He'd worked on healing in his own ways and felt the pain and loss and heartache differently. But as the doctor said, it didn't mean her method was wrong, just different. And Jake was a patient man. He loved Maggie, and he would be next to her as long as it took for her to notice he was still standing there. The thoughts of their loss swirled, and he felt his own emotions boiling up. He slipped into the guest bathroom in the hallway, his chest tightening as he shut the door. The tears came fast and hard, his breathing racked as he gulped for air and composure. He remembered the empty bassinet in the delivery suite and the rushed way they tried to remove the baby from the room. But Jake had seen the top of his son's head and the dark swirls of hair there, wet with birthing fluids. He had seen the tiny blue limbs hanging lifeless. And though he never saw his son's face, he signed the papers for them to harvest the viable organs. It was the right thing to do. But for several weeks, his nightmares were filled with empty babies. Their middles hollowed out, their eyes missing. Sometimes they wailed, blood leaking from the wounds. Other times they laughed and cooed, seemingly unaware they were missing vital organs. The latter were much worse, often twisting an otherwise normally safe dream into something surreal when he turned toward the happy noises and found he could see right through his son's center. He shuddered at the memory of the nightmares. The thought dried his mouth, like water pulling away from the shore before a tsunami, and his tears flowed anew. Maggie turned the water off and stood in the sudden quiet of the shower for a moment. A heavy sigh, and several blinks later, she found her inner calm, the lack of which had initially sent her to stand under the beating stream of too hot water. She shook the sadness free and reached for the towel hanging outside the stall. She froze at the sound of footsteps in the bedroom. Jake? She pulled the towel around her and pushed open the door between the bedroom and bathroom. The room was empty. Somewhere in the house, a toilet flushed, and she shrugged before returning to the bathroom to towel off and get dressed. As she pulled the brush through her hair, she heard a door close and turned back towards the bedroom. Its door was open. She set the brush down and with a raised eyebrow walked out into the hall and looked at the other 3 doors on the second floor. The guest bathroom was open. The avocado suite was open, but the striped spare bedroom was shut. Again. She was sure she'd opened it earlier. Her eyes narrowed as she tried to remember if it had been today or yesterday, but she shook her head, confident it had been earlier that same morning. She pushed the door open and looked around, half expecting to see an open window. She found nothing. Twisting her lips into an expression of disbelief, she put her hand on the door and opened it as far as it would go. She stood back and stared at it, willing it to close. The door didn't move. The room was empty, and Maggie returned to her bedroom to finish getting ready. Dressed, she made the bed and headed to turn back downstairs to find something for lunch. She grabbed the baby blanket she'd set on the dresser and pulled it toward her, knocking the Bluetooth speaker to the floor. Hearing the soft thud, Maggie turned. Recognition in the form of a thin smile spread across her face as she retrieved it and set it on the dresser. Perhaps tomorrow's shower would have some music, one of the quieter playlists. As she stepped from her bedroom, movement caught her eye, and she looked across the hall to the open door of the striped spare. A thin, dark-haired boy of 6 met her gaze from inside the room and smiled mischievously as he pushed the door shut again. And that was from The Headless Boy.